Hi everyone, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. Today we're talking about navigating Google search ads for your accounting or bookkeeping firm. So I'm really thrilled today to be joined by Rachel Crocket, who's Regional Digital Sales Manager at NZME, and a pretty expert person to have on board. So welcome Rachel, thanks for your time. So my name is Charles Clark, I'm the Marketing Director of Boma. I will be moderating this. So what that means is that I'll be letting Rachel do most of the talking, but I will be fielding your questions. We will have time at the end of the webinar for your questions, so please fire them in. You can do so via the Q&A pane. I'll keep a note of them, and then in the last sort of 5-10 minutes, we'll go through them all at once. So anytime you think of a question, please do fire it in. So just before I hand over to Rachel, I thought it would be useful to give you guys some feedback from what you told us of how you're using Google. And you see the first one here, it's actually a 50-50 split between those who aren't and maybe don't have much intention to, although you're here, so possibly you're curious. 18% who are using, which is great, and hopefully you'll get some great tips today on how to use it better. And then 32% of you who aren't using it but would like to start. So I'm sure Rachel is going to have a whole bunch of insight as to how you can get started on Google. So the other side of things I thought to look at was, what are the challenges that people have with Google search ads? And you can see here, I've collated sort of about 20 of the most common ones, but we had over 120 responses. And there are some quite funny ones in there, but basically what it seems to come down to is a lack of knowledge, a lack of expertise, uncertainty over R&I, how to do it well, or a fear of maybe doing it and then doing it badly and potentially either losing money or spending money recklessly. So lots of feedback in there. Thank you so much for all of that. We've definitely, or Rachel's definitely taken that on board, and she'll be talking to a lot of those challenges as we go through. But look, for now, Rachel, I'll hand over to you, and keep those questions coming as we go through, and we'll talk again at the end.
Cool, awesome, thanks everyone. So this is kind of just a bit of an overview of what I'm going to cover today. So, obviously with Google, you could talk forever, talk for hours. There's so many kind of ways to go into it. But I suppose I just want to take you guys through kind of how it all fits together, how actual, Google ads actually work and how you can use them, and then the kind of how it all fits with digital and traditional, and then, perks of using professionals and whatnot. But as Charles said, chuck some questions in the Q&A and we can answer them at the end. So, the first thing to really think about is it's important to start with how Google fits into the holistic consumer journey. Over the years, consumer behaviour has changed a lot, and I think we can probably all agree the impact of COVID has not only just changed things in terms of working, but just changed how we kind of deal with everything in general. So if we all sit back and think about our own daily patterns, you might wake up, you'll browse the news or Facebook, might do a few Google searches throughout the day, you might listen to the radio on the way to your work, on your way home, look up some directions on maps, and then possibly do some more searches during the day. So Google generally refers to this as what we call the messy middle. So it's easily defined as, what do we want? All of the information, but when do we want it? We want it right now. So the way people make decisions these days, it's messy and it's only getting messier. But still, there's lots of things we already know about purchase behaviour. It's not very straightforward. You don't just kind of decide today, oh, I'm going to get a new accountant or something like that. There's lots of complicated web touch points that differ from person to person, by product, by service, by location, everything like that. So the important part is for businesses and advertisers to have some understanding of those touch points and then kind of make sure that their brand is within those touch points. So an easy way to kind of talk about this is that Google did a study asking some people what's a logical search journey when you're buying a holiday. Not that many of us might be doing that now, but it's what they did. So the results were pretty simple. You book your flights, you book your accommodation, book a rental car, and then book in some activities. Seems logical, seems what everyone would kind of do to book a holiday. What it actually looked like is this lovely kind of mess on a page, I like to call it. It's not so simple. Instead, it's kind of it's a web of back and forth actions over 259 what they call micro moments, so little instances, 15 different actual touch points, so websites, everything like that, and it took over 12 weeks. So this is quite a similar process to any other high-priced products or services, or things that might involve a bit of change in order to move. So you can kind of get the idea that it's actually not just a think of it and do it kind of scenario. So what we do know about consumers today are that they're very curious about information, but we're also very demanding. We know we can get the information and we want it, and we want high quality. But then, chuck in the end, that we're also very impatient. We want that information and we want it now with good user experience. No one wants to click through to a website and have a terrible user experience and then just leave.
Actually, and just on that point, something that we've often talked about on our other webinars, especially digital marketing, we talk about the importance of your website, we talk about the importance of your social channels, of having good blogs, of sort of doing all these things that are going to give you a great online presence. So what Rachel's really talking about here is that sort of Google is one part of that, but all those other elements are going to be part of the overall that decision-making process. So if you haven't seen any of our other webinars covering these things, you can go to the resources page on bomamarketing.com and you'll see a whole range of webinars covering everything from social to digital to website best practice.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like going into a physical store. If you have a bad interaction, there's a chance you may not come back, and digital's no different. If anything, it's less personal because there's no one there in the front. But yeah, so what are Google search ads? You might have heard these called AdWords, all the same kind of thing. Generally, Google Ads is the platform, and within that, there's lots of different types of advertising units. But relevantly today, we're just going to talk about Google search because these are the most common. So in a nutshell, you might have noticed that when you search for something, say like accountants near me, which you can see on the screen there, you're served multiple results. All of these are clearly marked ad as well. So on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see an example of the screenshot. These are paid for results by advertisers. Below this, we've then got the Google Maps listing, and then generally below that, there's some more of the organic search results, which are non-paid. So that's more of your SEO kind of organic results. So how do they work? So there's generally the 3 R's with Google: reach, relevance, and ROI. So if you take anything away from this today, those 3 R's are definitely one of the main ones. So every time someone does a search for an individual thing in Google, the algorithm works its magic. No matter what the phrase or words are, in that split second, Google algorithm crawls all the possible advertisers, weeds out the ones that aren't relevant, and shows the searcher a number of ads that it deems to be the best match with that search query. The end users then served a number of ads deemed most relevant to what they searched for. So relevancy really does come into it. If Google thinks that that phrase isn't relevant to that end user, it's going to go, well, no, that ad's not worth showing to that person. Let's show them something that hopefully they will engage with better.
And can you just explain phrasal, the phrase that they're using? So that's like the need help with GST returns. Yep. That's what a user types in to sort of indicate what they're searching for.
Yeah, so those keywords or phrases, anything you type into that Google box, as you can see there, I couldn't even spell when I was trying to do it, but Google kind of came back with a, do you mean this? And it will use that to kind of determine what it's going to show me. And so the best part of Google Ads is the high reach. So you can put your company in front of your target audience exactly when they're searching for what you want. So you have that control over what things you want to show for, but also things you don't want to show for. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more in detail soon. So as I talked about the relevancy, so again, it's just going to show exactly what you're kind of looking for. But lastly, that ROI figure is so important because if the end user doesn't click on your ad, you don't pay for anything. So it's you only pay when someone clicks on it. This is because Google ads are known as what's called cost per click or CPC. So there's always this jargon in there, but it just means that, again, you'll only pay when someone actually physically clicks on the ad. So now I know what a lot of you are thinking, how much will that click cost? It's quite a hard question to answer, to be honest, but basically it comes down to various different factors, including things like the actual keywords themselves, what region or area you're targeting, whether it's, Auckland Central versus, a remote city or something like that. Your campaign budget, what your competitors are doing, what landing pages you're sending them to, and many, many more things like that. that's just where, you know, the campaign manager like myself at the other end works with all of these factors to help you guys determine what is the best kind of keywords and stuff for me. So I know what you're thinking, it's how does Google know what's relevant to me and my end user? So basically what happens is with the ads that you're served, Google uses machine learning and millions of data points across all its networks, actually billions. So this machine learning is really taking on board all interactions that happen online. So everything you do, whether you're logged into your Google account especially, all comes back to Google, so they can kind of put you in different buckets based on what you're interested in or what you're searching for.
So that might be things like searching for newspaper articles on social media. You might be looking at videos. You know, all your online behaviour. That's what that means?
Yeah. So it's really just kind of going every interaction you have online. Google kind of goes, well, we think because you've done X, Y, Z, you're potentially in market for a new car, for example. Maybe I've been looking at lots of cars, reading reviews, all that type of thing, interacting with ads. Google kind of puts it together from that. So that's where we really talk about that messy middle. It's all those things that you do online. So Google campaigns will also adjust according to things like goals that you set in the campaign. So do you want as much traffic through to the website, as many clicks as possible? Do you just want to show as often as you can? Or do you want as many leads, so maybe phone calls or form submissions or something like that? A good campaign will be linked to your Google Analytics for your website. And then from there, we can set up any goals that are kind of a joint venture between, you know, the client and the campaign manager to agree on what those are. And then those can be pulled across to the Google ad account so that Google can then say, okay, we want more of this type of activity. Let's drive for people who are going to be more likely to do that. And again, that's just where that machine learning comes in. Google's fantastic. I mean, I'm not paid to say that or anything, but Google is fantastic, but it sees copy, not images. So it's really just using all those words and putting them together in context. So that's just where things like human interaction from a campaign manager helps with that success of a campaign, because we can read into that context and help weed it out a little bit more. Yeah, the something is, it's really just that machine learning and kind of taking on board everything that's going on. That still doesn't mean it's, you know, easy to get keywords and stuff like that. So let's move into that. So in terms of a campaign, it's very easy to set one up on your own. Just chuck in some phrases, a little bit of ad copy and some budget and let Google do its thing. Unfortunately, Google doesn't work when it's just a set and forget. That's when you end up wasting budget, overspending budget and just kind of letting it do its own thing. It just won't work to its full potential, and that's potentially why some people think maybe Google doesn't work for them because it hasn't in the past. So one thing I always say is a campaign is only as good as the information put into it. So, you know, you're putting in rubbish, it's going to spit out rubbish and wasted budget at the other end. So by having things like a proper structure and kind of proper goals and everything like that, the campaign will really optimize towards what we're putting into it, so that on the other end it can spit out for you those quality leads, hopefully, that strong ROI, and really just have that high converting campaign with less wastage.
And so when one sets up a campaign and you put in the initial keywords and the structure, from your perspective, as you say, so you would let it run for a period of time and then you would go back in and then what would you be reviewing it, or how often does one need to be in there sort of looking at the performance and sort of thinking about how would we improve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of people will think you can just set up a campaign next day, everything's going to be sweet, you're going to get all these leads rolling in. But we always really say the longer a campaign runs and the more actual data it gets, that machine's going to learn and kind of work faster for you and learn more about it. So the longer it runs, the better kind of the results will be as well. So we always say a minimum campaign length for search is your 3 months. In that 3 months, you learn so much about what's happening, what's working for at that particular client in that area, everything like that. It's really that kind of 3-month learning period.
And some of the feedback we had from people attending today, we asked how much are you spending per month, and some said, look, you know, anywhere from $50 a month, you know, a couple of hundred, and then we had a few sort of over 1,000. Is there any rule of thumb in your mind as to sort of, you know, under this amount is just too little to sort of really get the benefit? Or is it sort of just depends on, you know, what keywords you're chasing and how much competition there is?
Really comes down to keywords and competition. I mean, if you've got a accounting firm that has, you know, 20 different service ranges, you've got things like rural, commercial, personal, tax, GST, all these different things, that's going to be spreading it quite thin. You're almost spreading the budget way too thin. Whereas if you're just focusing on a couple of niche areas that you want to focus on, that's going to work harder for you.
So I suppose in that case, you then need to be clear on, as you said earlier, goals, but also what is it that you want to, what services, what products do you want to then put yourself in front of, so that you're, say you only had, say, $200 a month, which is a decent amount of money. You say, okay, well, I think with that, we're just going to try for 3 or 4 things to rank for, because anything less, to your point, it would be too thin.
Yeah, it's really about honing in. Also knowing what you don't want to search for as well. I talk about that in a minute, but it's more about, everyone always says they want leads, and it's like, that's cool, you want leads, you want this, these inquiries. What types of leads do you actually want? And it's really kind of about working together in a partnership to figure out what exactly you want, and then working back from there, going, okay, we'll weed out traffic like that, and we'll really just hone in. Google's really great at, the back end will say exactly kind of how much of the share of the market you're capturing, what budgets, if you were to increase, this is the likely results and stuff like that. But I often just, starting somewhere is the best thing you can do. Starting with something.
And what is share of market, just for those of us who don't know?
Yep, so that's just kind of saying, it's just a figure that, or metric that Google uses to say, of the keywords or the kind of wording that you're targeting, with the budget you've got and the location you're targeting, that's how much of the market or how many of the searches you're capturing each day, basically. And it kind of just gives you a bit of a kind of a market share analysis against competitors.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so leading on from keywords, so you can see here on the screen, here's a couple of examples of just top, I think it was just like 10 or 15 keywords. This is by far not as many keywords as there are. There's a million trillion more. If we think about it on here, these are all exact spellings. So this hasn't accounted for any misspellings or anything. But you can even just see the difference between, almost 5,500 people a month on average in New Zealand search for accounting. 2,500 almost search for accountant. Same number of people search for chartered accountant. And you can just see those start to see those different variations. Like I said, this is just the kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of keywords. So I think, like I touched on earlier, consumers are demanding and impatient. So which means that our spelling and typing can be a little bit slack, especially if we're in a hurry or on our phones, for example. I'm sure many of us have gone to Google and our spelling has not been quite accurate. But you'll notice that Google, still because of its machine learning, tends to know what you're on about. So what I tend to do is just say, think about how many different ways there are to search for a particular phrase, e.g. accountants, accountant, best accountant, accountants near me that specialise in XYZ. So there's just so many different ways. And if we include misspellings and synonyms, there's just no way to capture absolutely every phrase. Like I said, Google accounts for all of this. But there's some tips and tricks in the platform to help you refine and hone in on exactly what you want. So for example, if you don't want to focus your spin on commercial or business accounting, that's fine. There's ways we can kind of work together to weed that traffic out. So my recommendation is generally to start with a mixture of quite generic searches, but also have a few tighter ones in there. So ones around like accountant near me, best local accountant, etc., etc. And then if you've got a specific category like personal accounting or small business accounting or something like that you want to focus on, keep those a bit niche as well. What's really important is to put yourself in the mind of someone who's actually searching for you. What would they be searching for? What would they be really kind of thinking that they want? And so always just say, think like an average Joe. If I was searching and didn't exactly know what I wanted or needed, what would I search for? So sometimes even just asking around your receptionist or anything like that in terms of what questions are being asked or how people describe things is kind of the best place to start. Sometimes excluding internal industry jargon, even though you as a business owner might think that that's what people would search for, you've really got to flip it on its head and go, what would the end user or what does my ideal customer search for? Some of them may be on that really niche exact jargon. A lot of them will probably just search for accountant. I need an accountant, that kind of thing. So it's really the best piece of advice here is just kind of put yourself in the end user's shoes. Companies like myself, when NZME, we run a lot of different kind of campaigns. So you start to know what the kind of trends are and whatnot. For ages, the trend was near me. Everyone wanted to know near me, open now. They were kind of searches. Flashback a few months ago, spikes for delivery or online, those kind of searches were definitely spiking. So just keeping in mind different trends like that as well. But again, Google does kind of account for all of that type of stuff. So how does it all fit into the consumer journey? So gone are the days where you used to pick up your lovely old phone book to find a company. Instead, generally, your phone book's at your fingertips. It's not very often that everyone's away from technology, so it's generally right there for you. One simple search can lead you to exactly what you wanted to know. Whether you search the company name or a broader phrase or category, you can be found and you can be in front of your client base. So having this digital presence has really become quite a vital part of every marketing campaign. And it can't be, if you can't be found online very easily, chances are your competitors are, and your competitors will win against you. So research shows that around 50% of people turn to their smartphones for immediate information or advice when triggered with that kind of need or unexpected problem or situation, or even if they're just starting to research. So Google and the web in general is really used to educate consumers on where they should start and what they need, and to try and help them, guide them through that process. And that's really where Google search ads can come in and hopefully, help pull together a whole marketing campaign like we've talked about. So ensuring that someone who searches can actually find your business as well. Brand awareness, though, definitely has a strong tie-in with Google Ads, and with users more likely to click on a brand that they recognize and trust. So that's why we definitely say that there's a strong correlation, a very strong correlation, between Google search and more traditional mediums like radio and print. If you search for something and you read something that potentially, mimics maybe your radio ad, or you've seen that brand in print or anywhere else, you're more likely to click on it because in your mind it's going to register as you having heard of them before. And this is a nice little slide that I always like to use this tool. It's a free tool where you can just kind of check what kind of volumes are of search and intent. So on the red line is for lawyers, blue line is for accountants. These are just generic kind of search terms. But what we can see is there's always peaks and troughs. People are always going to be searching, and there's always interest. So it's got the two different kind of trends in there, with a drop around Christmas, which is the natural kind of thing. Everyone's shifting to more of a retail focus, and same with kind of New Year. And then there's a natural drop this year for lockdown. But otherwise, I think the thing to take away from this is people are always searching for your categories. They're always searching, and that's why Google Ads are generally, even though we say it's a minimum kind of 3-month learning period, Google search is really your always on type strategy. People are constantly searching day and night. So why wouldn't you want to be where they are, where your audience is? So we talk a lot about kind of how it all fits together, but I think, again, just put yourself in the mind of your target consumer. They're unlikely to just consume one type of media. So you've got to make sure that you're using the best tools out there to broaden your reach, grow your business, and achieve your business goals. Obviously, it's quite hard to be everywhere and have to spend for absolutely everything, but that's just where, like I talked about, it's really about just honing in on what your key objective and your key goals are, and then identifying where your target market is and how you can best be in that moment with them. And digital marketing can definitely be enhanced when combined with traditional media, but likewise, traditional media campaigns should be shared and supported with your kind of social, digital, everything like that, just for optimized impact. Like I said, it's not really likely someone's just going to see one TV ad and then go, cool, I'm sold. There's probably so many different steps in that process, like that lovely messy middle graph at the start, that's going to kind of spur them on.
And actually on that point, for you as an accountant, that might be that you see someone at an event, maybe it's your local association event, or you meet them in a restaurant or bump them in a cafe, and then they come onto your website, and then maybe they start following you on social media. All these things are really, really important. And how it can work is, you build up that relationship with them over time, even if it's just online. And then, when it comes to sort of searching, they're in that sort of buying phase, and like, right, I'm going to search for an accountant. And then your ad, maybe along with a couple of other people's ads, comes up on Google search, but they recognize you because they've had all these interactions with you. They're much more likely to then click on your ad because, hey, they've met you, they've seen your video, your videos, your websites, your webinar, your social media. So it's really, as Rachel said, they're really all intrinsically linked. And if you just have one and not any of the others, it's much less efficient than doing, making sure that it's sort of a holistic perspective.
There's been definitely lots of studies over the years that search is the number one, or radio, sorry, is the number one driver of Google search, because it's that kind of thing. You're driving along, you're listening to something, but the second you can, hopefully not when you're driving, you'll pick up your phone and do a search, whether it's for that brand or that category, but it's just, they're definitely linked together. So I've got a good little video. Hopefully there's some Tottenham Hotspurs fans out there. Sorry I couldn't get a All Blacks video, but this one we'll have to do. So this will just kind of, it is relevant, trust me. It just kind of helps pull together the idea of all different parts of a marketing funnel are relevant. Oh, and there should be sound, but it doesn't work. You get the idea. So basically every time one of the players touches the ball, their little face will light up down the bottom.
I think what it's representing is, instead of the players, these could be different parts of your marketing funnels. So it could be that it's your website, it's your social, it's an event you did, it's bumping into someone at a cafe, it's an email that you sent, it's a phone call that you had. Those touch
points.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. We really need an All Blacks example for this. And they score. Everyone cheers. Stop that there. We get the point from that, but basically, so would it be fair for the guy who scored to get 100% of the team's salary? No, it wouldn't. So the whole idea with this is the same kind of thing like we've talked about for marketing channels. It's really that whole sum of all the different parts and all those different user journeys that come together to get that end goal or that end lead. So I think sometimes, it's quite hard to kind of put together how it all works together, but hopefully that little video kind of helps, drive that in a little bit.
And there's definitely quite a few things that we're talking about today that don't cost any money. So if you're thinking of, your social media, your website, having a few blogs, these are, you own these assets. And so other than maybe a little bit of your time to keep them updated and put some content in them, they're free. And then there are other things which cost a bit of money. So if you're running some ads, be they in traditional like radio or print, or online, in terms of Facebook or maybe Google. So it's a big combination. And the great thing is, if your free or sort of owned assets are, really strong and performing well, then when you do the paid ads, the paid activity, it will just make it much more efficient.
All links together. So this is one of my favourite slides on this deck. So like a small child, it takes time to nurture a campaign. So you've got your campaign managers, you've got all the information you're kind of feeding into it, and the machine is really helping to nurture that baby and kind of get it optimized for what you want. And this is purely because it is actually a really technical skill that people like myself are trained in, making sure to look out for specific things, knowing what kind of factors can influence and make changes and everything like that, and working together. I always kind of phrase it as you wouldn't do your own plumbing or cut your own hair or build your own house. And I, for one, surely if I ran my own business, would not want to do my own accounting. So you hire the professional that does that for you. So
I was just going to say, in terms of the professionals, just a word on this. There are plenty of cowboys out there who maybe once upon a time have done a course, or they used to work, a while ago for an agency, and they've sort of gone out on their own. And they might be based in New Zealand, or you can do Google campaigns from anywhere. So I know Rachel has a lot of clients in Australia. There are plenty of people in third countries who tempt people in with very cheap offers. So they'll say, "Oh, look, it's great. I'm going to do your Google for you for $100 a month, plus the media cost." I just say, go in with your eyes open, because these they're not registered, you often don't know what you're getting, and you're basically giving them access to your Google Analytics, your back end, and they can really do damage to your brand, and also financially in terms of wasting money. So NZME are a Google Premier partner. They're only one of only a couple in New Zealand, and you don't get to become a Premier partner without Google placing a huge amount of trust in you. Plus they're audited regularly, they get trained regularly, they're all up in best practice. So just consider, when you do hire a professional, there are different types of professionals. And if you are willing to invest money in Google Ads, then make sure that you invest it with someone who knows what they're doing and is going to give you a transparent and effective campaign.
Yeah, I think I always think about like the Google kind of sides of things as well, and the kind of relationship you have with a campaign manager is to really think about them as like a partnership or an extension of your own marketing or sales team. This really frees you up to kind of, do what you do best, which is running your business and focusing on your own clients. Whereas Google can essentially be your 24/7 salesperson. It's working when you're asleep, when people are still searching. So as Charles touched on, so NZME are one of few premier Google partners in New Zealand who work strategically with Google Australia and New Zealand. There's definitely different levels of partners. So there's your blue badge, so you can see the badge on the screen there. There's the blue badge, which are pretty standard. They run a handful of campaigns. That's pretty much it. They don't get too much in the way of support. There's then the red badge, which is the premier Google partners, which we are. But there's also, we're kind of one tier up in that we work so strategically with Google Australia and New Zealand. It means that, my team is kept to certain standards. We've managed certain volumes of accounts. We get specific training. It also means if there's certain beta trials, as digital likes to bring new things out every few days. If there's new beta trials of products or anything like that, or something's changing within the actual space, we're kind of told about it first and have the opportunity to pass that on to our clients. For you guys, it just really means that you can trust the company that you're working with, because if Google trusts them, then you're kind of in the right hands. So that's just how we work, and we definitely work as more of a relationship kind of based. It's your business, we just know the audiences and how to kind of work that algorithm. So before we jump into questions, I just wanted to quickly just tap over again exactly what the kind of key conclusions or takeaways were. So definitely those 3 R's: reach, relevance, and ROI. Relevance is like the one main goal of everything Google. For the end user and the advertiser to have the best experience possible, that's kind of all it really wants. Like I said, what goes in will come out. So if rubbish goes in, the campaign at the other end is not going to churn out those leads that you want as well.
And so just on that relevance side, this is relevance in terms of things like the right keywords with the right ad copy at the right landing page. Can you just take us through how those three, the right keywords, so that, because they all have to link up to each other. Otherwise the relevancy score goes down.
Exactly. So if I'm searching for something quite specific, say I want a local rural accountant who's going to help me with my farm accounting or something like that, ideally I'm going to then be served an ad that talks about my, my company's skills in rural accounting or farm taxation or anything like that. If I then choose that's the company I want to click on, I will click on it and I'll be taken to a landing page which talks further about that and further about the skills. In Google's eyes, that's a really good customer experience. As a customer, that's a really good experience. The bad thing would be to send them to just a generic home page or a generic contact page that has nothing about what I've actually searched for. So that's just where identifying those kind of good match types and knowing exactly where to send people will just help that consumer journey as well. It may still be quite early on in my interest in my research, but again, it's going to help me kind of learn more about your company and hopefully kind of put you in one of those decision-making processes. Yeah, and like we said, it is a technical skill, so just making sure that of who you're working with. And then lastly, your potential customers are there, so why aren't you?
I think that's a really good point. And looking, as we saw in your feedback today, over 20% of you are already doing it, and another sort of 18 or 30% are keen to do it. So that's 50% of accountants on today's webinar are either doing it or want to be doing it. So I mean, it is a little bit of a case of, like all digital, you need to be out there because your clients will be researching you online. The stats we've seen is that even if you get a word of mouth recommendation, you will then go on, 80% of people will go online to then make searches for you, and they'll look at your website, they'll look at your social pages and all those elements. So your competitors, and it is getting more competitive, doing this. So if you're just starting out, or if you're wanting to make sure that your firm is going to be robust for years to come, you obviously need a pipeline of clients coming in. Or we have talked about in other webinars wanting to grow purely from getting I suppose your current clients to sort of just spend more in areas that they didn't know you had. I mean, there's an argument to be said that you could be obviously advertising on Google your services, so specific things. So not just an accountant near me, but a tax specialist near me, or someone who specializes in GST, so or cash flow management. There are lots of things that you can advertise or put your name against that speak to specific services maybe that you want to highlight, as well as yourself as an accountant or bookkeeper.
Cool. Are there any questions?
Yep, so that we've only got one question at the moment. So if you've got any more questions, please do keep them coming in. So this one was a really good one, and it was, do you have any search data for Xero? And to me, this is sort of two parts, and it's one is, how would I find out this search data? And I think, Rachel, you can talk through the tools out there.
Yeah.
And then also, if I was going out to sort of think about what keywords I should be ranking for, and Xero might be a classic one, how would I, if I was doing it maybe in-house and not using someone else, how would I, because it's not just someone searching for Xero, they might be searching for a couple of things. So Xero plus one or two other words. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the screen I showed a few screens back with the kind of accountant's trend graph, that was definitely one tool that we can send out where you can kind of look at what kind of search volumes there are. There are other keyword planner tools within the Google ad platform itself. But what I would also be cautious of, and I say this to a lot of people when they want to, for example, use keywords that are competitor names or specific brand terms like Xero, again, think about what that end user is searching that for. Do they want, yes, if it was a word like phrase like Xero accountant or accountant who knows Xero or something like that, that would be a more tightly and relevantly aligned and worthwhile phrase for you. However, it could also be someone wanting to search for Xero for their own business or anything like that. So it's really about trying to think, okay, why exactly do we want that branded term? What benefit is it going to add to my business? And then kind of refining it based on that. And again, like I talked about, using kind of focusing on as well, what you don't want out of it is just as important as what kind of leads you do want, because just to try and refine it that way.
And in terms of, I mean, oftentimes, so we've got a client in Kerry, and we will often see, we'll sort of put in their terms, and then we'll see some other ads from other search ads from other local accountants. So that's called sort of competitor bidding. So I'm a competitor, and I'm going to bid on people who are searching for a particular accountant in Kerry. How does that work, and what do you think? Is it a good idea, bad idea? What are the pros and cons?
It really depends. Competitor bidding, it can do one of two things. It can perform really well for you, or it can waste your budget. It can actually, it's really kind of that polarizing. I always just say again, if I'm searching for something by brand, it's because I want that company. I've already kind of sold on them or anything like that. There's probably some different instances of indications where you can sway that person, but I think a lot of the time it's really, I'm searching for that brand because I want it. Sometimes the thing is, if they've got quite a generic brand name, for example, like just small business accounting as a brand name, that is both someone's brand name, but a user search query as well. So in that instance, that would be a bit more of a relevant query to focus on. It's really, again, just thinking, is it a brand term or is it not? Google doesn't know if it's a brand term or not, but that's where you've just got to refine it down. So really just kind of thinking about it that way. A competitor strategy can work. Like I have seen it work. In some instances, it could be more of a brand positioning strategy for yourself, but it really comes down to, if you've got a limited budget and you want specific leads, I would generally recommend, if you've got, if you've only got that specific budget, focusing on those, those kind of keywords rather than focusing your energy on trying to tap into someone else's traffic.
And then we've got another question, which is, what's the best way to find keywords relevant to our area? And you mentioned earlier, there's a couple of tools out there.
Yeah.
One of them is the Google Keyword Planner. Are there any other ones that you'd recommend?
There's probably lots of other free ones out there. I can definitely find some more links to them. But I think sometimes the best way to come up with keywords is just kind of looking at what your products are called, or your services, for example, your service names. And also, talk to people who get your inbound queries, so your receptionists and stuff like that. Talk and find out from them what kind of words people are using when they're describing what they want. So that's really when you're going to learn more about things. And that also kind of comes into it when you've got a campaign running as well, knowing what kind of inquiries are actually coming through at the other end. But there's definitely lots of free tools out there just to kind of spit in different keywords. Sometimes as similar as using like a thesaurus or something to get other variations of phrases helps as well. But that's where, your campaign manager, we have all those tools. It's really up to the client to kind of give us the brief with what they want to kind of cover. And then we can come back saying, hey, this is what we'd recommend.
Yeah, I think one thing to note, it can take a huge amount of time if you're not familiar with this to sort of do the research and then set it up and then optimize it. So Yeah, so I've put one of the keyword planners in there. It's a link. I think you'll need a Google account to get in, like a Gmail account. If we think it's small, we'll put them in the follow-up email. But yeah, it's just be mindful of, you know, how valuable is your time versus spending time on this, because it's not like you come up with a keyword list and that's your keyword list forever. It's the idea that you start somewhere and then you test and evolve. So it's a bit of an ongoing process, and that's where I think having a sort of an account manager doing this specifically for you can really optimize the investment in it.
Definitely.
So another question is there an optimal number of searches per month to look at when choosing keywords? So I think this one is, if you saw, like an example that we had up before, accountant, there are 5,000 searches per month. That's obviously a great one to go. But say you were looking at a keyword and you said, okay, there are 50 searches per month. Then how does one decide? Do you sort of look at things like how specific is it and how linked am I to that? Like if it was, you know, searches for an accountant in Kerry or Broome, well, maybe 50 searches a month is going to be, that's a great number.
Yeah.
But if it was a different keyword, you might think, well, that's not worth it. What are your thoughts?
It really comes down to like, so I generally have a bit of a mixture of those really high top end, highly searched keywords, because that's going to help your campaign get that traffic and get that traction that it needs to kind of start, you know, learning about it. But then starting to have some of those more niche phrases in there as well. Maybe ones that do have slightly lower search volume. But again, Google will still account for kind of misspellings and synonyms and stuff in there. But it's definitely, I take the approach of, especially in the early days, put in a mixture of high search volume and lower niche search volume phrases in there, then let the machine do its thing for a while with some of those kind of campaign interactions, and actually learn based on what results you get. You know, are you getting certain phone calls or certain web inquiries or any of those online actions from some of those more specific words? If that's right, then that's cool. You can pause and play around with some of those words to really start honing in and crafting a campaign that's going to work for you.
And actually that gets back to your point of when you set it up, to have the goals that you want to achieve put into your Google Analytics. So actually, because Google, if you tell it to optimize to a specific goal, then it will make sure that it optimizes to that goal. And so that goal, as Rachel said, might be people filling out a form on your site or downloading an ebook or something like that. You have to tell it what it should be aiming for. If you don't give it something to aim for, you know, it will just be doing lots of different, exactly, and you'll just waste money.
Yeah.
There's another question here. So, do we get better influence having Google My Business along with Google ad campaigns to get better results? So, what do you think about Google My Business?
So the two, like any Google product's always going to be designed to work within each other. So Google Analytics links really well to Google Ads. Google My Business definitely is important to have. Like it's one of those fundamental kind of things I think every business should have. What we can actually do as well is link that Google My Business listing to your Google ad account, so that underneath the ad, you sometimes have little kind of snippets of copy and stuff like that. But that means if I'm then searching from my phone and maybe I just want to ring you straight away, if I see your ad and you've linked the Google My Business listing, I can actually just click the call. I can click straight from that Google ad to call you. I can click straight on that Google ad to find your opening hours or get directions to actually physically come and visit you. So definitely the importance of having the two of them together, because they merge and link so well. And again, it's another one of those kind of goals or conversions that you can work towards as well.
Yeah. And look, I'm about to get on to the last question, so we've got another minute or two if anyone wants to fire them through. This one, so what is the approximate fee to have this managed? So Rachel, you can probably talk better to this, but what we've done with our partnership with NZME is basically create 3 different packages. And the idea here is that it gives you best bang for buck and the most effective use of sort of your investment. So Rachel, do you want to quickly talk this through?
So there's lots of different companies that do things in different ways. Some might have an upfront setup fee and then charge an hourly rate or something like that. What we do at NZME is we have a set management fee that is built in with all of your costs. So it varies depending on spend, but it's generally around that kind of 30% mark is roughly where we place it. But that really means that even if we spend more time upfront doing the initial setup, it's all kind of covered throughout the entire thing. You won't be sprung with any extra additional bills. If Google tomorrow decides to bring out this fun new fandangle thing that needs to be applied to every single campaign, it means that you're not going to be sprung with an extra fee. It's all covered. So it basically just covers all of our time from, reporting back and setting everything up, those ongoing optimizations and everything.
And also that included in that is a dashboard. So one of the things a lot of people won't necessarily give you is a live updates on how your campaigns are going. They like to sort of see how it's gone, maybe massage the figures a little bit. So NZME actually have a live client dashboard, so you can log in at any time of day or night and see exactly what's happening. Then get on the phone and have a chat about what you might be seeing and what you'd like to sort of question.
And it really, transparency is key. As Google partners, it's one of the things, in our agreement with Google is to be fully transparent so that you as a client or as a customer of ours, how much you've spent and where your dollar has gone. Myself and my team are very transparent in the fact if something's not working, we'll come to you and say, hey, this isn't working. How about X, Y, Z? And we're actually working with you because it is your business and it's, we're responsible for helping manage that, that dollar and getting you those leads.
Yeah. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. And Rachel in particular is super, super interesting. I just always am in awe of Google, Google search. There's so much that I just don't know about it still. So really, really interesting to hear it from yourself. Everyone, thank you so much for all your time today. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar tomorrow. We'll also send you out a bit more information about NZME Search Ads campaign. There'll be a little link in there and you can basically arrange to have a quick 15-minute chat with Rachel and her team, and you'll see more information in there. I would really, really recommend it. We've been talking to you for quite a long time now about making sure your website's up to scratch, your blog posts are going there, your social, all those other elements, your online webinars and Q&As, doing good, having good Google good Google search is really just another great pillar in your sort of online acquisition strategy. So really recommend you having a look at that.
Cool. Thanks for having me, everyone. Enjoy your day.
We'll see you next time, everyone. Thanks again.